Hi everybody, today I'm going to be making some wafer paper calla lilies, and I'm using two different types of wafer paper just to see how they'll turn out. So one is regular premium AD grade wafer paper, and it's thinner and it's a little lighter, and I'm speeding this up. Clearly I do not cut things out this quickly. But the other is wafer card, and it's a little thicker, which works well with callas because callas have kind of a thick waxy petal. And I am using a hot steamer. If you use a hot steamer, be really careful because it's hot and I burn myself. So you have to just make sure you don't hold your hand in the steam too much. These are millinery stamens, so you can make edible stamens if you want. I'm just using these because I had them on hand. Here's the hot steam, and see it says, be careful, don't stick your hand in there. So just watch out if you're doing this because I am just using steam. I'm not using any kind of piping gel or conditioner or anything for the wafer paper. And I just wanted to see what would happen. So I'm holding this in the steam. You can see the wafer paper. This is card. This is DD grade wafer paper card. It's thicker. It's twice as thick as the other type that I'm going to be using in just a minute. And it's harder to fold, but it is thicker like a real calla lily, so it looks more opaque. And I'm just steaming it so that it's softening up, and I'm folding it around the stamen just to have it kind of like I'm judging the size. So now it's slid out, I'm just ignoring that, but I'm just softening up that very end so that I can fold it in, and when it gets wet enough, you can fold it in, it's going to stick to itself. And see how it's curling, just holding it in the steam. But again, be really careful if you do this because hot steam is hot, and see how it's boiling in the little steamer. It's hot. It's 200 degrees. It's 212 degrees. So anyway, so when you get it wet enough, you can press that in. It sticks to itself. You don't need any glue or anything. I would use a little edible glue, corn syrup or something down inside the flour once it dries out, just to keep that stamen in there, especially if you're using gum paste that has, you can do gum paste with, petal dust or some kind of yellow. Sometimes people use cornmeal to make the little texture of the yellow stamen on the inside, and that will stick to the glue inside the flour. But you can make the shells like the white part of the flour before that, which is what I'm doing, and then take them out to let them dry and then attach the stamens in there later. All right, so I keep moving the steam out of the way because it is really hot. And see how I just flinched? It's hot. All right, so just be aware of that because I did burn my finger with it because I'm not very careful, just so you know. All right, now this is the lighter paper. It's wigglier, and I'm of course holding it out of the camera, but you can see it bends a lot easier. And as I'm working with this one, you'll see how fast that bends. You're going to see how it kind of folds in. It doesn't look as good. It doesn't keep the shape the right way. I would say that if you're going to make calla lilies, use the wafer paper card, which is the DD grade, or you're going to have to do a lot more manipulation. And see how this is just kind of collapsed on itself because the steam just makes it flop. The steam is very wet. It's clearly just water, and the wafer paper really gets affected by that. And you can kind of pull it out. I mess around with it, and I just have to do a lot more manipulation with this one because the AD grade wafer paper is half as thick as the DD, and it's just so much more affected by the steam and the water. There's no way that you can, whoa, see how that just makes the whole thing collapse. It's really very sensitive to the steam, so you have to be careful and work fast. But, I think that I got it to look okay. But at one point it kind of folds over. I think it's going to do it soon. It just took a lot more manipulation. And even if it does kind of collapse on itself, like right here, it's sticking to itself, you can pull it apart if you're careful and if it's still wet enough. But sometimes if it collapses and it sticks to itself and it cools off, you're not going to be able to fix it. And it just ends up as a big piece of goo. So you just be careful. And I really, for this method, I would stick to the DD grade if you're going to do this with steam. If you're going to use the AD grade, maybe using a conditioner and putting it down on, that might be the better option if the paper is light because it just looks like it's more textured. And see how smooth this one is. This is the one that I did before with the wafer card. And I decided to take it and kind of try to flip that out and make that side go out a little bit. I think my camera strap keeps falling into the picture in the bottom there. But I decided to kind of give this more of a curve. And you can go back and work it, because once it dries out, you can go back and add more steam and move it around. But it just looks better because it's basically 2 sheets of the AD paper put together. It's twice as thick and it looks more opaque, and it's just easier to manipulate because it doesn't react as quickly to the water in the steam as it hits the flour. So after this, I decided that if, that one worked pretty well, but I like this little tip. And you know how some calla lilies have a really long tip on the end that really folds over and curls around? I took the other piece of card and I'm just going to make like a really long tip of it and kind of cut this more symmetrically. And you don't have to cut this with a pattern, just cut it. And I think the wider the circle is, like the wider across it is, the bigger a curve you'll be able to get in the edges of it. But the longer the tip is, the more curl you're going to be able to get over. So it's kind of a good thing to do different variations on it. Don't use a template that's exactly the same for every single flower, because flowers all look different. And if you have, it's not going to look exactly the same every time anyway. But every flower, if it's a little bit different, that's perfectly fine. So you don't really need that much of a template. Just grab one online. There's plenty of them. And if you have a calla lily cutter, you can use that to trace it, but don't feel like you have to make them exactly the same all the time. So for this one, I'm just pinching that at the bottom just a little bit to secure that. And then I wanted to see if I could get that tip to really bend over. And you can even make it longer. I think I made this one longer than the first one, but you can make it longer and have it curl more. If I can get this in the picture, there we go. And it just makes it look a little more realistic, because the callas really do have that long petal tip. And what you should do is get it steamed so that it's softened, move it into place, and then hold it out of the steam for a bit so that it cools off and it hardens up. Because when it cools off, the wafer paper is going to keep that position that it's in as it cools. So if you can get it to stay the shape that you want as it cools off, then it'll look really nice. And this one was working really well. I think I had a nice tip on it. And the card really definitely is the best option for this kind of thing, for this particular flower. I'm going to try to do the wafer card with some peony petals too, because those tend to be a little heavier. And also because the card is double thickness, you can kind of stick a wire right up into it. And I was doing that with some other stuff. So that's another option. I'm going to do some videos with the petals wired with the wafer paper card. And see, the stamen is still loose. So if you have made some out of gum paste, you could attach them. But these are the card callas that I made out of the wafer paper card. That's the DD thickness. This one is the AD, and you can see how it's like more flimsy, and it just looks like it's more affected by the steam. And see, look, I just ripped it. So it rips easier. It's just not as secure. The card looks a lot better. It's more opaque, and it looks more like a real calla. So that would be my recommendation. Go try it, have some fun, and use the conditioner on the AD.